So I'm Delphine Potdevin. I'm a PhD student in psychology in l'IMSI lab in France with Nicolas Sabouret and Céline Clavel. And this research project is in collaboration with the company David the Humanizer. So virtual agents are part of our daily lives, but still actually they are suffering from an adoption issue. And so we are questioning in this presentation what's wrong with ECS. Many efforts have been done on task-related skill of virtual agent, but we also know that social-emotional dimension of the interaction is really important for satisfying customer relationship. And so we believe that ACS must be provided with social skills to be considered as social partners of interaction. And being recognized as a social partner of interaction is related to the sense of social presence, so the sense of being with someone else. And this has been studied previously in computer-mediated communication. But we also know that ECS can elicit social presence in humans. And this concept is a two-dimension concept with intimacy in a part and immediacy in another part. And in this study, we focus on intimacy for its relation with the concept of social presence, but also because it's a social ability that has been broadly studied in human psychology. And intimacy is one particular social ability, and it's understood as a multi-dimensional concept that refers to many definitions and that has been approached in many terms. Globally, it's understood as an interpersonal process of emotional communication that involves expression process, like intimate behaviors, and perception process, like intimate experiences. And intimacy refers to behavioral, physical, cognitive, and emotional sharing experiences that involve both verbal and non-verbal communication. And in a common sense, intimacy is understood as like only in a romantic relationship, but actually intimacy is not only romance. Intimacy is really a building block for interactions. It has been studied in many different types of interpersonal relationships, like companionships or parent-infant relationships. So intimacy is really associated with well-being and positive interactions. And it's the core, it is at the core of the most gratifying and satisfying human relationship. Intimacy is also described in customer relationship. It's associated to satisfaction and the duration of the customer relationship. Of course, in this context, intimacy is mostly related to emotional intimacy, and it's considered as limited, but of course it's still intimacy. And more recently, intimacy has been studied in human-agent interactions. Moon in 2000, for example, showed that an agent who's able to self-disclose increases self-disclosure behaviors in humans. And more recently, Lee and Shaw in 2017 showed that an agent that self-discloses increases user satisfaction. So in this study, we interrogated the role of intimacy in user experience. And based on the literature in psychology and human-computer interaction, we assume that increasing the social dimension of human-agent interaction by providing the agent with intimacy-related behaviors may lead to a better user experience and may improve users' adoption of the system. So to test our hypothesis, we relied on ergonomic literature and specifically on the Q model for user experience. This has been developed by Malk and Turing in 2007, and this model is particularly adapted for our questioning because in this model, emotions hold a critical place in the user experience. And next to the perception of instrumental qualities of the system and the perception of non-instrumental qualities of the system. And so based on this model, we made the assumption that providing the agent with intimacy-related behaviors as system properties may influence interaction characteristics, so the perception of intimacy, and may lead to better user experience. So I present an experimental study involving real-world interactions with intimate tourism counselor. So the virtual tourism counselor that you can see here has been developed by the company Davy and aims at helping tourists with planning their trip in a tourist office. So for this experiment, we recruited 60 participants that were real tourists that was in the tourist office to get information about tourism. And so the participants were randomly assigned to an intimate or a non-intimate condition. And in the intimate condition, they were interacting with the intimate agent. In the non-intimate condition, they were interacting, of course, with a non-intimate agent. And so they were asked to interact freely with their virtual counselor, and they could ask questions about tourism in natural language, and especially just to get the information they were at the tourist office for. So our agent is an autonomous agent that has professional skills about tourism, and in the experimental condition of intimate condition, it also provides social skills by expressing intimacy-related behaviors in her verbal and non-verbal communication. So the dialogue system that generates verbal behaviors of the agent is able to understand the user's request in natural language and identify the response in a corpus of responses that has been previously written in collaboration with experts in tourism. The agent delivers task-related information about tourism, and in the intimate condition, she also delivers intimacy cues as a supplement. And the non-verbal behaviors of the agent are automatically generated by an animation engine that works with a kind of matching procedures. So the engine detects the intimacy cues in the verbal response of the agent and triggers intimacy-related behaviors synchronously. And of course, if there's no intimacy cues in the response of the agent, for example, in the non-intimate condition, the agent is still animated, but with standard or task-related non-intimate behaviors. For example, just descriptive gestures or non-emotional facial expression. So the agent's behaviors, intimacy-related behaviors, have been selected based on a theoretical model of virtual intimacy that we previously developed and which relies on psychology literature. So this model includes 3 dimensions: honesty and genuineness, positivity, and mutual comprehension. And for each of these dimensions, we use different type of verbal strategies to elicit these dimensions. For example, self-disclosures, emotion and opinion sharing, the expression of positive feelings, or being re-entering or supportiveness, for example. And the non-verbal expression of intimacy was based on 4 animation parameters that include facial expression, for example, smiling, head move, head tilts or nods, gazes, for example, eye contact, and gestures. It could be, for example, open arm gestures or self-oriented gestures. And so here you can see 2 different examples of behaviors combinations. On the left is attributed to the non-intimate condition, and on the right it's an example of intimate behavior in the intimate condition. So in this study, we were interested in the interactions characteristic and on the user's perception of virtual intimacy, social presence, and user experience. So in a previous study, we found that external observers were able to perceive intimacy in human-agent interaction in the professional context of tourism counseling, and we want to confirm that the intimacy-related behaviors of the agents can be perceived by real users in real interaction in real world. We also question how intimacy-related behaviors affect social presence, user experience, and especially emotions in user experience. And we also question how perceived intimacy can predict social presence, user experience, and the module emotions. And finally, we question the role of social presence in this equation. So first, as a mean, 11 questions were raised per interaction, and 18% were misunderstood by the agent. But we found that the misunderstanding of the question were not affecting the user's perception, neither of the perception of virtual intimacy nor the perception of social presence and user experience. We also found that the most the interaction lasts, the most users perceive negative emotion. But what's it's interesting is that this effect completely disappears in the intimate conditions. So intimacy related behaviors may play the role of like a protective effect from negative emotions in this context. We also studied the influence of intimacy behaviors of the agents on the perception of users, and we found not significant effect on the global perception of virtual intimacy, but we found a strong effect on the dimension of honesty and genuineness of the agent. We also studied this on the perception of social presence, and we only found an effect on the perception of co-presence, but we also found that participants who interacted with the intimate agent reacted more socially, significantly more socially than the participant who interacted with the non-intimate agent. So this could be a proof in favor of perceiving social presence. And finally, we tested also the influence of intimacy behaviors on the perception of user experience, and we only found an effect on the perception of the social status of users. In addition, we also studied the influence of perceived virtual intimacy, and we found that perceived virtual intimacy was a strong predictor for social presence, user experience, and especially the module emotions of user experience. We found that the effect of the perception of virtual intimacy on the perception of user experience was mainly a direct effect, and unexpectedly it was not mediated by the perception of social presence. So finally, intimacy behaviors of the agent were finally poorly perceived by users, and that may explain that we found small effects of the intimate condition on the perception of social presence and user experience. As in human interactions, we make the assumption that intimacy process in human-agent interactions is sensitive to mental representation and expectations. And we suggest that intimacy perception is sensitive to mental representation and expectations, and that could be explaining why honesty and genuineness was completely perceived by users, but the two other dimensions were not. Maybe because people, like participants, have no expectations about social skills for agents. And the fact that the agent is being honest and genuine is not really expected, and participants perceive this very well. In contrast, the dimension of positivity and mutual comprehension could be expected as task-related or a professional skill, because the agent is supposed to be positive and comprehensive, because she is a counselor. So maybe that's the reason why it has been less perceived by users. And moreover, self-disclosure behaviors that were associated with the dimension honesty and genuineness is the most typical intimate behavior in the literature in psychology, and it's probably playing a central role in conveying intimacy. Also, we suggest that intimacy expression influences mental representation, and that's the reason why we found a significant effect on the perception of the social status of users. And finally, we found an effect of on the perception, an effect of intimacy-related behaviors on the perception of co-presence, and co-presence is found in the literature as the first perceptive level of social presence. So we could consider that this is a first step for ECs to become social partners of interaction. So even if we found small effects on of the intimacy behaviors of the agent, we however found that when intimacy is perceived, intimacy is a strong predictor of social presence and user experience. So perceiving virtual intimacy may determine user experience. And we unexpectedly found that this relation seems not to be mediated by social presence. So maybe this suggests that ECs now have necessary to be recognized as social partners to increase user experience. So we assume that maybe this phenomenon involves intimacy-specific mechanisms, maybe associated with emotional contagion. So future work will be to improve intimacy behaviors so as to be correctly recognized and perceived by users, and to study intimacy perception and user experience in repeated interactions to explore their influence on building a human-agent relationship. Okay, thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, feel free to ask.